Welcome to Financial Clarity, the podcast dedicated to helping service-based small business owners achieve financial success. Join us as we demystify financial concepts, get practical tips from seasoned entrepreneurs, and discover strategies to increase profit and value. Hannah Smolinski here. I'm the host of the Financial Clarity podcast, where I connect successful entrepreneurs, financial experts, and leaders in the small business community. Past guests include Adi Clevitt, a business process documentation expert who breaks down how to create processes in simple ways to enable better delegation, and Michelle Baumberger, a lawyer who's created an innovative practice by providing general counsel services that are flexible to what a business needs as they grow. If either of those sound interesting to you, please make sure to check out these past episodes on your favorite podcast app. Or you can also check out our episodes on YouTube. We actually record all of our podcasts on YouTube as well. So if you prefer video, you can go and find those at the Financial Clarity Podcast YouTube channel. Today's episode is brought to you by my company, Clara CFO Group. Clara CFO is dedicated to providing financial clarity and profit maximizing solutions to small businesses. The team at Clara CFO are seasoned accounting professionals with a heart for small business. We help growth-minded entrepreneurs thrive through fractional CFO services and financial education. To learn more about Clara CFO Group and how we can help your business, visit claracfo.com. Or you can feel free to email me directly at hannah@claracfo.com. I met today's guest through our Seattle chapter of EO, which is Entrepreneur Organization. And I realized that by now I've mentioned EO a lot on this podcast, but I guess that means that it's doing its job because it's connecting me with really inspiring entrepreneurs. So that's what I love about the group. And probably I never would have met our guest today, Caity, if it hadn't been for EO. I mean, maybe our paths may have crossed since we are in the same city. But I am very thankful for the EO network and everything that it's been able to provide and these introductions it's been able to allow me to have. So if you want to learn more about EO, if it sounds like something that might be good for you and your business, you can check out eonetwork.org. So today's guest is Caity Cronkhite. Caity was born and raised on a remote farm in rural Indiana. She eventually left her prairie roots to attend Carnegie Mellon University, where she received a degree in technical writing and communication. After college, Caity went west, first to San Francisco Bay Area and then to Seattle to start her career as a technical writer and eventually an entrepreneur and founder of her company, Good Words. Caity loves talking about the intersection of writing and technology and convincing skeptical people that good documentation can change the world. Caity, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Hannah. I'm excited to be here.
I am excited to talk to you. And I'm also very, very curious about your farm upbringing. What type of farm were you on?
I was born and raised on a 90-acre farm with my family. So my parents and I lived there on a farmhouse. And we rented out the land to local farmers. We grew corn and wheat and soybeans, and there were always cows wandering around the pasture in the yard and all of that good stuff. So it was a real farm, a real working farm.
I love it. Do you ever miss that life? Now you're in the cities and a different life altogether.
Oh, that's such an interesting question. Sometimes it was really interesting. So I lived there for my entire childhood until I left the state for college and went to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania to CMU. And it took me a really long time to get, Pittsburgh is not a huge city. It's got, about 300,000 people. It's a real city, but it's not the biggest city you can go to. And it took me years to get used to the fact that there were just people everywhere all the time. I could go outside at 4 a.m. and see someone 3 blocks away, and I would be like, how do I get away from these people? So it took me many, many years. I love my life in the city now. I live really close to downtown Seattle and, would not trade it, but I definitely appreciate having had such a very, very different experience growing up.
Absolutely. I either think like people might just run away from it and never want to go back, or like there is some fondness there and like kind of some sort of desire for maybe like having a farm one day yourself. Is that in the plans, your long-term plan?
Oh man, that's I feel like one of my escape fantasies should my business, not work out, although knock on wood, hopefully it will. is to escape to Whidbey Island and have a quaint little, hobby farm someday. Very different operation than a commercial
Yes.
farm in rural Indiana, but
Right.
but I do have an appreciation still for the peace and the idle that can come with living in a truly rural place. So
Yeah. Well, and Whidbey Island is always a good place to be.
always lovely.
Love that place. Well, I would love to hear about, we kind of heard a little bit about your geographic changes from Indiana to Carnegie Mellon
Mhm.
and then out to San Francisco, but and now to Seattle. But I would love to hear how you got to a place where you're in your career and you were doing technical writing, but it sounds like you left and started your own thing. What was that catalyst for starting your own business?
Absolutely. So at the time, I was living and working in the San Francisco Bay Area. I had spent my entire career up to that point as a technical writer working for other people. So, I started my career at large enterprise companies, working on large teams of writers that were supporting engineers. And then I eventually moved into working as a solo technical writer at various startups. And the year was 2015, or no, 2016, excuse me. And I was working full time at a startup that was going the way of the startup, if you know what I mean. So the writing was on the wall that company probably wasn't going to last very long. There had been a couple of rounds of layoffs, and I mercifully was not affected by the layoffs, but I knew what was coming at that point. And so I started looking around then for other jobs. I mean, I had no intention of starting my own business then or ever, really.
Mm.
But I started just looking around for other technical writing jobs. And I was pretty uninspired by what I found, actually. Everything was really, very similar to what I had already done in my career. It was either, they were either opportunities to join huge teams of writers at large enterprise companies, which I had already done, or other opportunities to be kind of the solo technical writer or one of a couple of people at a small company in a startup. And I was really looking for something different. I didn't quite know what, but I knew, the thing that always drives me forward is learning and gaining new experiences. And so that's what I was looking for when I was looking for a new job. And I had always kind of thought about freelancing or doing some consulting work or something like that. I mean, writing careers lend themselves pretty well to freelancing, and technical writing is no
Right.
exception. But it was always something that I was sort of afraid to do. It was like, oh, I'll do that in 5 years when I have more money saved up, or when in a couple of years when I feel more stable, or something like that. And I had a bunch of people telling me, that freelancing was scary and dangerous, and you didn't know where your insurance was going to come from, and you never knew if you weren't going to be employed or whatever. But basically, I didn't have any better ideas at that point. And I was sort of like, well, YOLO, you only live once, let's try it out. And so I decided to just take like a part-time freelance gig as a technical writer for a really cool project, actually. It was for Airbus on some experimental aircraft design. Um, and I absolutely loved it. I loved working for myself. I loved freelancing. I loved finding my own clients. I loved working with a diversity of clients that I was able to find. And so I basically just kept doing it. And so for a year or two, I was an individual freelancer, just working on my own projects. And then one day, basically, I got a project opportunity that I didn't have time to take on. So I really came to this fork in the road that I think a lot of people who are accidental entrepreneurs get to at some point, where it was like, I could either say no to this project that was awesome, or I could try something new and try hiring someone to help me out with it. And what I always say is that I really founded Good Words and continue to operate Good Words with a YOLO ethos, where if I see an interesting opportunity that I think could be lucrative or interesting or a good opportunity to learn, I try to lean into it. So I hired my first person at that point. And that also worked out great. And now here we are. So we've grown the team over the years. Salesforce is one of our clients. Sorry. GoodWords has been in business for about 6 years at this point. So it's been a really fun journey so far.
Yeah, that I love that mentality of like YOLO. You don't know if you don't know if it's going to work. So, I mean, how has that served you well over the course of owning your business? That mentality.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I don't think that I would have started my business at all had I not um sort of had that attitude. Like I said, when I was kind of first going out on my own, I had everybody in my ear telling me like, this is a bad idea, this is really risky, like, how do you know if this is going to work out? Do you have a backup plan? And I just remember hearing that feedback and kind of taking it in and always thinking, what's actually the worst that could happen? I didn't feel that, the risk was actually all that great. I mean, worst case scenario at the time when I was starting my business, I thought, okay, if I crash and burn, if this doesn't work out, I'll go back and get another job. Like I can do tech writing for somebody else again. So I think that my business wouldn't exist at all if I hadn't kind of started with that attitude. But since then, I feel like it's come in handy many times. As I was kind of saying earlier, like as an entrepreneur, there are all of these forks in the road all the time where it's like, okay, here's your opportunity to either keep doing what you've been doing or try something new or try to find a new opportunity to grow or try working in an industry that you've never worked in before or serve a new type of client or something like that. And so, having at least some willingness to take calculated risks and say like, I don't know all the answers. I don't know everything that's going to happen on the other side of this decision, but I feel confident enough in myself and my team to give it a shot. I think that's a super useful attitude. At least for me, it has been.
Yeah. I appreciate that because I think I get a little bit stuck sometimes and like overthinking, and then I'm a little more risk averse. So I think sometimes it makes me pull back and go like, "Ooh, what if it doesn't work out?" But then, I mean, if it doesn't work out, really think through like, what if it doesn't work out? Like, what's the worst that can happen? I
Mhm.
mean, a lot of times it's really not that scary,
It's
whatever
true.
it
Yeah.
might be. Even like hiring employees, it's like, worst thing that can happen is maybe they don't work out. And then, you can release them to another opportunity. And that's kind of better for everybody. Like if you really think about it, there's not a lot in our businesses that really can't be reversed in some way if you make a decision and then you pull back. So
100%.
I like that. I saw recently on LinkedIn that you recently got certified as a woman-owned business. So congratulations for that.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
That is I hear it is quite a process. Could you tell us a little bit about it?
Totally. Yeah. So I want to give a shout out to GoodWords COO, Lauren Nasdowski. She's my right hand and she's awesome. And she was really integral in helping us get through the process. And yeah, what I would say about the process is it is certainly a process. It's not insurmountable. It's not something that's impossible to get through, but it does take diligence and planning and organization in order to kind of carry it through. So for us, we found out about the WBENC and WOSB certifications just from, the entrepreneurship community. Over the years, several people had said, oh, you need to get certified, you need to do this. And for a long time, I didn't really understand the value of the certifications. I was like, well, like, duh, I'm a woman, I'm running my business. Like, isn't that enough? Like,
Yeah.
like, don't people know already? But as I did more research and found out more about it, what I learned uh, was that these certifications are super useful for connecting with other women entrepreneurs, for potentially expanding your business with companies that want specifically to work with women and minority-owned businesses, and can only really do so in an official way with businesses that have these certifications. So finally, this year, we decided to pursue the process. And essentially, the way the process went is we had to gather up a lot, a lot, a lot of paperwork. And that included things like our operational agreements, our business licenses, evidence of when we were founded, how I funded the business when I started it. I had to provide a personal statement about my role in the business and proof that, I owned it, operated it, I'm the majority owner of the business and things like that. And essentially, we sent that off into the ether with the WBENC organization. And then we waited. One of the things that we found super useful in the process, though, that I would recommend everybody do who's interested in pursuing these certifications was we talked to a couple of other companies in our network who had done it. And they gave us some really, really helpful tips about, where to find some of the information, how to get through some of the bottlenecks, how to connect with people in the local chapter to help us move through the process. And so, I think the first big chunk of work was just getting everything together, getting it all submitted and making sure it looked really clean. And then the next chunk of work was just waiting for feedback. I will give all the credit in the world to WBENC. They were super communicative, super helpful through the process. If something was missing or not quite right, they messaged us and helped us get things on track. And then eventually, they had an interview with me to make sure I was real and the business was real. And then next thing you know, we were certified. And I think the whole process took about 4 months from start to finish. So it was by no means a short process. But I think it's totally worth doing. I mean, we've been certified for a month or two now, and we're already getting connected to some really great opportunities for the organization and through the network. So it's been really interesting. It's been a really interesting learning process.
Yeah. We actually just had another guest on the podcast who also got certified, but they work a lot with public entities and not-for-profits and foundations and organizations like that. Who is your target client? It sounds like tech companies, probably private or publicly held, but not like public as in government agencies, I would imagine. But I'd love to hear about
That's a
who
great
your
question.
ideal client is.
Historically and currently, we work almost exclusively with enterprise technology companies. So large Silicon Valley, California-based for the most part, tech companies. So like Salesforce, and Google and large companies like that. We work with some other privately held or smaller enterprise kind of technology forward companies. Basically, the way we put it is that we work with companies and industries where tech is kind of at the core and at their heart. But one of the things we're really excited about pursuing in 2024 is work in the public sector. So as part of the certification process with WBENC, we also were able to get certified as a woman-owned small business through the Small Business Administration, which is a certification that government and public sector entities look for when they want to do business with women and minority-owned companies. And there's actually, I've been doing a lot of research and meeting people in the public sector and in, government contracting. And there's a lot of opportunity that I didn't know about until a few months ago there. So we're really excited to kind of look there, start partnering with people there, and hopefully provide the same services we provide to our awesome tech industry clients in the public sector as well. So great question. And hopefully public sector will be in our portfolio here very soon.
Yeah, I love that because you kind of are opening up a whole new realm. And it's interesting because I think I see this sometimes where firms kind of niche into an industry, but as you mature and grow, you're like, okay, we've got that, but we also can then expand. So kind of niching first in some ways it can be helpful. But then you're like, now I might have this whole other vertical I can explore. So, and it's that YOLO mentality that I love. You're like, why not?
YOLO.
Let's try it.
Why not? Let's try it. And I think what's really interesting too about pursuing kind of the public sector work is a lot of the feedback I got for years and years and years about working with government and public sector was very similar to what I got when I started my business. You know, people have always said, like, there's a bunch of red tape, it's really slow, they don't pay. And as I've been doing research over, particularly in the last year or so, I've gone to a couple of government contracting conferences. I've made connections with people who work primarily in the public sector. And actually, what I've found has been really surprising. Like, people are very idealistically driven, have this really rich attitude of collaboration and working together to move, our communities and our states and our federal government forward in ways that are really innovative and collaborative and supportive. So, I am glad I didn't believe everything that I heard. And I'm really excited to continue to kind of explore in that direction, but would also encourage anybody else who's interested to check it out because I think it's a little different than how we sometimes hear about working with those kinds of entities.
I think that's kind of, it's bringing up like imagery to me of, what, an obstacle for somebody might feel like a wall. And, you're saying like, just determine how big is that obstacle really for you? Like for you, it's sounding like, yeah, it might be something we need to step over, but it's not something that feels like too insurmountable. Like we can't get there. So I think everybody's going to have sometimes their different levels of what they feel is worth it and what they don't feel is worth it. So I love that, like, you're hearing it, but you're not like internalizing it and making it your decision. You're like, I'm going to do my own research and make my own decision on that.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's great. I would like to understand a little bit more about the actual, like the projects that you guys do for people. And then is it something that, like, if you could give us an example of the type of project that you have, and then do you work on a project basis? Are you on retainer? Do you act more as like an augmented staffing arrangement? Like, I'd love to kind of understand sort of the business model and the types of projects you do with clients.
Sure thing. So Good Words is a technical writing and documentation consulting firm. So there are a few things that kind of make us different and put us in our niche. So we really specialize in writing user manuals, documentation, and internal docs for highly technical companies and highly technical products and groups. So, like, if you've ever bought a new piece of software, like let's say you buy HubSpot for your business and need to set it up, and you go to their online documentation and you read about how to get everything set up. We write stuff like that for our clients. So, it's funny because I don't think most people out there in the world think that writing documentation or user manuals is like their dream job. But it was my dream job, and it's the dream job of everyone on my team. So there are people out there who absolutely love it. And that kind of goes to our second sort of motto that we have, which is we love what you hate. So, like, most companies are like, ugh, documentation, like what a burden. I don't want to work on that. And we are so stoked to work on documentation all the time. So, like I said, most of our clients are highly technical, disruptive technology companies or organizations where technology is really central to the business they provide and what they do. So, for example, some of our clients are like Coinbase or Salesforce. We've worked with Google, a lot of innovative startups, venture-backed startups out of Silicon Valley. We work in aerospace and autonomous systems. So basically anything that's highly technical, really engineering driven, is what we love and what we specialize in. And our third kind of tagline is nothing is too technical for us. We love super technical work, and we find it really interesting. So, most other writing firms kind of out there in the marketplace really specialize in marketing, SEO, blogs and content writing. And that's not us. We do all the other technical stuff. That's really where we fit.
Mm. I I'm curious how you get that knowledge transfer because
Hmm.
I mean, even like just a simple example, like your HubSpot example of like how to get up and starting with HubSpot, for example, like um, your writer is obviously not a HubSpot user. So how does that knowledge transfer happen between the technical people who are actually developing the software and creating all the user interfaces and everything, and then your writer so that they can do such a good job? Because I'm like, I don't understand. Like, tell
Yeah.
me.
Well, they're not a user until they are. So back to your question, I realized I didn't answer your full question a minute ago. The way we work is our writers are super embedded within our client companies. So we are working, sitting right next to engineers on engineering teams, in Scrum meetings, in design meetings, contributing and absorbing that information. And I think one of the common misconceptions about technical writers is that someone just dictates the information to us and we write it down and put it in the online help. And that's absolutely not true. So we are embedded most of the time in these engineering teams. We're testing the product, we're testing code, we're filing bugs, figuring out how the user is actually going to be using the product. So one of the things I like to say about tech writer, a really great technical writer is your best user advocate. So they basically
Oh.
sit on your team. They're testing and looking at these products in the same way that your customer is going to test and look at them and try to use them. And we try to preempt, what are the questions they're going to ask? Where are they going to get stuck? What's going to be difficult for them? Where are they going to get frustrated? And then we write all of the supporting documentation and materials that hopefully gets them through that entire process as seamlessly as possible. So we're really in it, to be honest. I mean, we're right there with QA engineers and software developers and product managers and all of the people who are actually working to build the product. We're right there with them in the trenches most of the time.
I that makes so much sense, and the quality of what you can get when you're like there and using it, I imagine, is just astronomical from trying to have some kind of like data transfer between like somebody telling you guys what to put in something. That just doesn't seem like that would work. So,
Well, and it's
and
just
then
more fun for
yeah,
us.
yeah,
We get to be in there, we get to be using it, we get to be learning new things all the time. Like it's one of the things for me that always made the job really interesting.
yeah.
And I think makes the job interesting for the writers on our team now. So yeah, it's just a fun job in its own way.
For people like you.
Exactly. For some of us anyway.
I'm like, I mean, actually being in the room sounds much more fun or, actually seeing it working than translating it than maybe what I was imagining in my head of what a technical writer was. So I'm really glad we're having this conversation because I am learning a lot. I'm not, that's definitely writing is not my strength, and definitely writing any kind of like detail level of that is definitely not a strength either. I'm a
Don't
video
worry.
kind of gal. I'm like, let's just record a video and then it'll be done.
You can always outsource it to people like us.
Exactly. Yes. And will do for sure. So, I am curious. So you've grown your business now and you've been in it for six plus years working on it. Um, and you never really intended to grow a team, but now how many people do you have on your team?
Yeah, so we have about 10 people this year. This year has been a little different for us than most of the other years that I've experienced running the business. So, is as of this date in 2023, the tech industry is having a pretty hard time this
Mm,
year. I've been in the tech industry since about 2010, and this is by far the weirdest year I have ever experienced. Just I feel like the tech industry is sort of having our very delayed COVID moment. So
mm,
companies are really kind of rethinking how they do business, their financial models contracting a little bit, or at least they have been over the course of this year, and being a little more conservative. So um, uh, most years our team is about 20 people. So we're running a little small this year, but you gotta adapt.
yeah, I think. it has been a very interesting year for many industries, tech being definitely one. We have a lot of clients who've, you thought that 2020 was going to be the worst year and it actually was amazing. And then 2021, we're like, okay, well, maybe now it's going to be hard. And that was another amazing year. So I feel you in that kind of delay with tech. It's been interesting. And then also we are having a recession. Like that is a thing too. So some of us,
Indeed.
we can't always be growing our businesses at the pace that maybe we were historically. But with the writing that you do and the employees that you bring on, do you bring on employees or are you more of a contractor model? I'm curious about that.
All of our people are full-time employees. So
Okay.
we pay people on W-2s. They're members of our staff. We keep them around for a long time. Most people work with us for years and years on project after project with various types of clients. So we have our people are employees. Yes.
Yeah, that's great. What have been some of the either, I guess, some of the mindset challenges that you've had, like as you've been growing your team?
Yeah, for sure. Are you curious about just kind of growing my team in general or particularly in this year?
I think in general, because I think, as we're growing service-based businesses, and especially I think because you were like, hey, I just want to do this for myself. And
Mhm.
then, hey, there's an opportunity. I'll find somebody else who can also help me. Have you ever had those moments of like, ooh, what am I doing? And should I be bringing on more people?
Oh
And
boy.
I mean, are you experiencing any of that? You feel it seems like you're very confident and you're going for it. And so I want to glean some information from you.
Oh, I have definitely had those moments. So I think the first big one really came a couple of years after I had started my business, and I had a team of about 5 or 6 people. And I was still doing my own technical writing projects at that point, and I had a really hard time letting that go because I loved it. I loved doing the writing. I loved working with my clients. I loved, learning about these awesome technologies and things like that. But I really kind of got to one of these forks in the road where I had all of these employees who were relying on me and my management, and who really needed me to be completely dedicated to them. And I was really kind of resisting it. I was spending about 20 hours a week still working on my own projects for clients, even though that wasn't what was serving my team. And I have to say, at that time, I did transition full time into management.
Mm.
And that was not an easy transition for me. Felt really, really challenged by that for about 6 months. Like I grew my business, as you said, as an individual providing this service that I was pretty good at providing to my clients. And I had a way that I like to do things. And I wanted my team to be able to do that for them as well. But I had to really, really grow really quickly to be able to help empower them to do that. And I think that's still an area where I'm learning and where I struggle sometimes. Um, but I had to grow out of this mindset where, when I was doing the writing, the metrics for success were, you know, writing these materials, making my clients happy, making their customers happy, producing something really tangible. And then when I transitioned into management, my measures of success were, are my people happy? Are they successful? And that felt very hard for me to grasp for a very long time. So I did a lot of coaching, to be honest. I hired a coach to kind of help me sort of get to the point where I had the capacity to do that. And I'll be honest, around that time in my business, I was actually considering like, do I just go back to freelancing? Do I close this down? Like, this is a lot. This is really challenging. I don't know if I want to do this. I don't know if I feel capable of this. And so I brought in somebody to kind of help me figure out the answer to that question for myself. Um, and luckily, she really helped me kind of develop my skills and my management and my confidence there, so that I was able to keep the company going and continue forward. But I think that's a very that was one of the biggest examples in the history of sort of growing as a leader where there was a definite fork in the road, and there were real challenges that I was trying to overcome personally to be able
Yeah.
to do that.
Yeah. I mean, that makes sense. When you started your business, you weren't thinking, I'm going to go and become a manager one day
No,
of
absolutely
people.
not.
Was there some kind of bigger goal that you identified, I guess, in your coaching process or maybe just in internal reflection? Was there something that you're reaching for that is like, I need to push through this management challenge in order to get to where I really want to be? That or like something that you're trying to accomplish with the business that did make you go forward rather than being like, I just want to be a technical writer and raise my prices and, live a little happy life on Whidbey Island with my little hobby farm.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really interesting question. Like, I I never set out to be an entrepreneur. I never set out with any kind of specific goal. Like, I mean, and maybe that sounds terrible, but basically the thing that always has driven me forward and continues to drive me forward is learning, gaining wisdom and experience. And the way that I've been able to do that is by trying new things, doing something different every time. And so I think that really kind of drives me forward in like I said, that YOLO ethos in how I run my business. And I'm always just kind of looking for and assessing what is the next best opportunity. Sometimes the next best opportunity is to serve my current clients really well, keep my team happy. And sometimes the next best opportunity is like, oh, what if we went after public sector work? Or what if we went after this new kind of client? Or what if we tried working in this industry or taking a project in something really technical over here that we've never worked on before. So I think that's really just kind of like what drives me forward as a person. And I've always kind of seen my business as a tool in a way. Like my business is a really useful tool for me to be able to learn, get really cool new experiences, meet really interesting people. I mean, like my business, for example, has given me the opportunity to join EO, which is where we met. And I've met all kinds of really interesting people and gotten to travel the world with that organization. So I never would have been able to do that if I hadn't, you know, 7 years ago, taken the next step and taken the next best opportunity. So, yeah, hopefully I'm not one of those people who is like, oh, I want to build $100 million business someday. I was always just kind of like, well, what seems fun and interesting and like it'll help me grow. And I guess that served me pretty well.
Yeah. I mean, I 100% agree that a, a business, if you choose to let it open up the opportunities to learn, you can be constantly learning. I think sometimes it gets a little tiring where you're like, can I just coast for a minute? At least
100%.
I feel like that sometimes where I'm like, can I just not have to learn a hard lesson today? Thank you.
That's very
But,
relatable as well.
you know, but yes, like from a personal development side, from a leadership development, from all these things, like I've never experienced as much growth as I have in the years that I've had my business.
Mhm.
So I think there's a lot of opportunities there. And so I love that. Like, so I'm curious, do you have any, I mean, I understand like you're driven by new opportunities and things that we can learn, but at the same time you are running a business and it needs to be profitable, it needs to pay payroll, it needs to be able to do it what it needs to do in order to continue to operate. Are there any metrics or KPIs that you like to pay attention to in your business?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So I think a few key financial metrics that we follow are we always keep track of our cash balance. I mean, for better or worse, that is what has always served us to get us through the tough times, making sure that we can always run payroll, take care of our people, even if payments are late or whatever. So we care very much about the cash we've got in the bank. We also look at gross margin on all of our projects and deals. It's always kind of amazing to me, being in the entrepreneurship community, that there are a lot of business leaders out there who have no idea if their company makes money.
Yeah.
Or they think they make money, but then they're like, why is there nothing in the bank? And it's like, well, you're not charging enough for the services you provide, and you're spending more than you're making. So we definitely look at things like gross margin on each of our projects to make sure everything is profitable and healthy, and all of that stuff. We also, we watch our payment terms like a hawk, making sure that we're getting payments regularly. I mean, I think especially as a small and a quote unquote disadvantaged women-owned business, that like making sure you're getting paid on time and advocating for yourself in that way is enormously important, particularly if you're like us and, we're a small business working with these multi-billion-dollar mega corporations, right? So that's another one that we monitor very closely. And obviously, our sales metrics, like how much is in the pipeline? How many proposals have we sent out? What are those proposals worth? All that good stuff. So we actually monitor quite a few financial metrics, weekly and monthly in our team meetings.
I love that. I think that what I really love about that too is that you've got metrics on the front end of like the success, which is like making sure that the pipeline is full, that you know what you're proposing. That's like before it becomes revenue, it needs to come from somewhere, that you're tracking that, and then you're tracking the profitability on the back end as well. So I'd like covering both of those metrics is really, really helpful. So like I love to hear that, and I love that I also love that you are always tracking cash. So I have a question on your payment terms, because you do work with such large businesses, and sometimes they can really bully the small business. But people want to go after the enterprise work because it can be very consistent. And, once you develop a good relationship there, you can become like a vendor that they go to again and again. Do you have any tips for how to get paid and how to get paid in a regular cycle, and what people should expect there?
100%. So what I'll say is that, we have had enterprise clients who are awesome with their payment terms, who always pay on time. And we've had enterprise clients who are terrible and who bully us and who never pay on time. So we've dealt with both. What I'll say is that this is maybe another plug for those women-owned business certifications or those minority-owned business certifications. So pro tip is that a lot of these enterprise companies will have different payment terms for businesses that are certified in this way.
Oh, I haven't heard that. Okay.
So for example, some of our clients, their normal payment terms are 45 days. But for businesses with certifications of certain kinds, women, minority-owned business certifications, other sort of like, classifications of that kind, will have 15-day payment terms.
Oh,
So worth asking those clients that you're working with if they have any accommodations for businesses with those certifications. And then another thing that I'll say too is, I've been surprised by how far you can get by just asking. So sometimes, what I have done in the past is gone to our procurement partners and said, like, hey, look, I have a budget of $1 million a year to run my business. And here's the effect when the payment terms are 60 days. Can we come to an agreement to bring that down? They don't always say yes, but sometimes they do. I've been surprised sometimes where they're like, okay, hold on, let's see what we can do. And then secondly, I will say, like, this has been, I was this way from day one of starting my business. I am an absolute bulldog. When those payments are 30 minutes late, I am on the phone about it. When it was just me running the business, I would sometimes be on the phone with accounts payable at whatever my client was for, an hour or two at a time, being like, no, I want to know when this payment is going to go out. I want to know when it's scheduled. I want a reference number. I was pretty relentless. And I continue to train my team to be relentless. And now, as I said, we monitor, like we have a weekly metric that we track. How many of these invoices are over 30 days or are, 1 day over their payment terms, essentially. And just having been really diligent about that historically, we almost never have invoices that are outstanding over and above our payment terms. So I think just what gets measured gets done, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like that's a quote I think that applies here. So if you aren't looking at it, if you don't know if your invoices are overdue, then take a look and then just get on the phone and get the money you are owed. So yeah.
Yep. We can take that little audio clip right there and we're good here. I'm like,
Yeah.
yes, it's so good. That is all really, really helpful because I think sometimes people are a little hesitant to follow up. They don't want to be annoying. They don't want whatever. And it's like, no, if you've done work for somebody, you have agreed to do work for them. It is absolutely your right to be paid within the terms that were agreed upon. And so if you need to follow up, if you need to charge late fees, if you need to do what you need to do, just remember, like, this is something that both parties have agreed to do. And somebody's not holding up their part of the bargain. So,
and you know what else is annoying? Not being able to make payroll.
Yeah,
so be as annoying as you want if you're not getting paid.
Yes, you don't want your employees to be annoyed with you enough to leave because they're not getting paid on time. Okay, well, we're gonna have to wrap up, but I do have one last question. I know, right? I have one last question to ask you. Before I do, I want to make sure to point people to your website. It's goodwords.io. So go check it out if you're interested in learning more about technical writing and want to see what they are doing over there. And the last question that I have is, what is one of your favorite business books?
One of my favorite business books, which I have been inadvertently referencing for this entire call, is Traction by Gino Wickman. So, as you know, my company is a technical writing and documentation company, and I consider Traction to be our user manual for how we run our business. When I got to the point where my business had grown to a point where I was sort of struggling with how to manage it, a friend of mine recommended Traction, and literally all I did was just everything it said. And it works. It works for businesses of our size. So I always, recommend that for other entrepreneurs who are running small businesses, who, maybe are getting stuck somewhere in the process. So definitely check that one out.
Yeah. And that's kind of referencing the entrepreneur operating system. So if anybody's heard us talk about EOS on this podcast, that is a fantastic read for if you're interested and you're curious before you kind of go in really into it. But it gives a lot of step-by-step to basically implement it yourself there. So definitely check out that book if you're interested in learning more. Caity, where else can people find you if they want to connect with you?
You can always connect with me on LinkedIn, Caity Cronkhite. You can check us out on our website as well. But LinkedIn is primarily where I like to go and make new friends. So please connect with me there.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time today. I've really enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you so much, Hannah.
Thanks for listening to the Financial Clarity Podcast. Be sure to check out the show notes to learn more about today's episode and click subscribe on your favorite podcast app.